Alrighty, good morning, good evening, good night, whatever it is here today, guys. This will be day 9, I think, of phase 1. This will be April 9th. Got all kinds of crazy things going on out here, from like lawnmowers to garbage trucks to the city testing fire hydrants. So I actually have to make myself a little cheat sheet today. So I want to thank a couple of you. So after talking to the Great Wall of Griffin, who decided to shoot up that email, thank you guys who have signed up for the Google Classroom. You know, there are other requests from like Ryan and Brennan and Dr. Gershon, so thank you guys for getting all that done. And instead of listening to me lecture, as fun as filming in my garage is, I'm going to start supplanting with like some documentaries and going back to like the Pacific and Band of Brothers. If you don't have access to that, don't worry. I have an ingenious plan that I will throw up on Google Classroom. So I hope all of you are doing well, getting accustomed to our new way of life right now. The State Board of Education is meeting about where we go from here. So that we cannot control. What we can control is this. And so we have been in Italy. And in the summer of 1943, Operation Shingle kicks off with the two-pronged assault on either side of the ankle of Italy. And, you know, by talking about being in the eternal city of Rome by Thanksgiving or Christmas, this clearly has not happened. And after 5 months of nasty fighting, the Allies are fighting through, you know, the mud and the bogs and the peat moss and the nasty conditions, fighting this tenacious enemy that is falling back, into the mountains, hilltop by hilltop by hilltop. So here we are. The Germans, by November of 43, had built a fortification known as the Gustav Line. And the bad weather in the winter, the rain and the snow, not only has it slowed down the American jeeps and tanks and trucks, but it's also grounded the Air Force. So if you remember Willie and Joe from yesterday, this is a foot soldiers battle right now. We're about 90 miles from Rome. Rome is in sight. But the soldiers are beginning to suffer from the cold conditions, being wet, being freezing, warm and muddy one day, and like boots sucking mud, and then the next day it falls below freezing. And dominating this is the 1,100 foot tall mountain of Monte Cassino. It was built in 529 by Saint Benedict of Nerissa, by a bunch of Benedictine monks. And at this time, it is only occupied by the monks who are providing medical care to injured civilians. They had to deal with the Germans. Look, no soldiers are allowed in here. Problem for the United States is, if you're looking up, the monastery dominates the valley. You can see, if you go there today and look around, you can see everything the way it was way back then. So maybe I'll bring up some other pictures and show you, coming up here, maybe tomorrow or so. So anyway, so these monks are there, and the Germans aren't allowed inside, but we don't know that. And so an attack happens, and this attack is just disastrous. What the Germans had done at night was they were able to sneak down, and they planted all of these mines. So some of the mines are known as bouncing Bettys. It's kind of like a tic-tac or a pill-shaped instrument that will pop up out of the ground and blow off right around waist level into your abdomen, into your femoral artery, and in your thighs. The other one is known as a shoe mine, S-C-H-U, and it's smaller and it can be better camouflage. And when you step on it, it'll blow off a foot or your leg below the knee. It's not so much a killer as it is designed to maim. And the Germans would sneak out at night, doing things exactly like they would do it on D-Day, is they would slowly begin to fall back and pre-measure for artillery and killer crossfire zones for their machine guns. So this whole thing was supposed to be a coordinated assault with Anzio Beach. And clearly this doesn't work. So in the wintertime, crossing the freezing Rapido River, our soldiers go in, all right? In the last several days. It took 6 weeks to go 8 miles. And it took 16,000 casualties to go those 8 miles. And so the surprise attack is sent over by several thousand men to cross this little footbridge over the Rapido River. And it simply doesn't work. As the guys get over, the Germans blew off the artillery and it destroyed the bridge. Now the river's not so wide, you'll see it here in 1 second, but it runs really deep and the current was flowing really fast and it was really, really bitter cold. So as the soldiers go over, they start stepping on the bouncing betties, the shoe mines. Those that aren't killed and try and race forward to close with the enemy, the machine guns open up on them. And these guys are simply massacred until they turn around and they call for a retreat. Let's get out of here, let's get out of here. And some guys start trying to jump in and swim across this river. Only the strongest swimmers make it. Many drown, few survive. Then there's the wounded guys on the other side of the river. So it was just carnage. I believe in the whole thing, about 1,600 guys are able to make it safely back over. Everyone else is just wiped out. So as we're forced back, we launch this massive artillery bombardment. We just open up on the hill. No, check that. 1,681 guys are lost, wounded, killed, and missing. So not the other way around, my bad. And so we begin firing at this massive artillery bombardment at these mountaintops. And you'll see us in a second, the Germans kind of dug into these foxholes. They just went down kind of into their mountain caves, but they were shocked at the number of artillery shells we were shooting. The Germans called Monte Cassino $1 Million Hill because of the artillery that we would shoot at it. And the 5th Army, is just stuck, all right? They're taking heavy, astounding losses. They can't move forward. So here's some of the dead soldiers lying in one of these bogs and ditches, all kind of, spaced out, just machine gun. And up here will be Monte Cassino, and here is the river. It really doesn't look all that big, but to get through the brush where the Germans were over here, you see this flat field that we had to run across. It resembles a more World War I-ish battle than anything. And so here is the monastery dominating the Liri Valley, just dominating the whole thing. Again, there were no Germans up in here. And so here's another scene, what you could see back in 1944. Here the Americans are over here having to cross through these small villages, making this ascent. And this is what Monte Cassino is going to look like when it's all said and done. Because the idea is, the reason we can't get across the river is those Germans are up in there. I bet they're in that monastery. We're going to have to blow it up. And guys were like, I'm not so sure about this. First of all, this is an ancient historical monument. We are in deeply Catholic Italy, in one of the oldest monastery in Europe, and you want to blow it up. They are our new ally, so it's, cultural heritage site number 1. Number 2, even if you blow up the monastery, you can't blow up the entire stinking mountain. I mean, it's sheer cliffs. You can't bomb the mountain to rubble. And so we hesitate. But because we can't get forward, here you're going to see the guys, as we talk about, laying on the crest of this hill, fighting from the bottom end of a village. And here are the Germans dug down in their deep foxholes, pre-sighting their mortar fire right in here. They know the exact distance, almost to the inch, so they're able to lay accurate mortar and artillery fire on us. And so Monte Cassino is going to be bombed. The Air Force is going to win out, and we went in. And the guy said, well, man, maybe we should let people know. So we flew over 17th Air Force and we dropped leaflets saying, hey, you better get out of Monte Cassino because we're going to blow it up. And the monks are like, but it's a hospital. There are no Germans here. In any event, the monks begin to leave. The next day, The mountain is just bombarded. It is leveled, as you can see. And now that the monks are gone and the monastery is mostly destroyed, now the Germans re-enter it. The rubble actually makes it better hiding places for them, for snipers, for machine gunners. And this is what the Allies have to go up and get into it. And I say the Allies because coming to assist are going to be some Free French soldiers who are able to escape before the surrender, and New Zealand Kiwi soldiers are going to come up. They are going to try and attack it from the east, coming in from the east side of Italy where the British 8th Army had been. So it's in February where these bombers come in and just level the entire place. British General Sir Harold Alexander, pretty good guy, sends in troops from all over the British Empire, from New Zealand, from India, and even some free Poles that were able to escape like the French before the Polish surrender. And these guys fight from small village to small village for 3 days. And Americans are attacking on the other side. Allies are in the south end of the village, and the Germans are on the north, and we're fighting. We have the village during the day. At night, the Germans counterattack, and the Allies are pushed out street to street, house block to house block, little shack to little shack. This fighting rages with guns, pistols, bare hands, bayonets. It's just nasty. And there's this enormous pressure coming from Washington by President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill as Anzio Beach begins to fall apart. We can't have what's called another Gallipoli with Winston Churchill on his hands from World War I. So to kind of regain momentum, the week of March 15th, right about, historically when we got out of school here, till the 23rd, we began to attack again. And once again, going across the Rapido and over the field and up those hills, we lose 4,000 more guys wounded, killed, missing, combat, ineffective. And then the attack is called off because these torrential rains that come down. So we're stuck, and we're still not there. And so finally, it's the beginning of May. And this new operation is called Operation Diadem. Think of, Harry Potter, the diadem. And an idea is just we're going to combine elements from every single part of the mountain. We are going to attack at once. The French are going to come from the south. The British and India from the east with mountaineering, Gurkha and Sikh soldiers. Poland's going to come straight down from the north. The United States is going to come from the west, and we are going to hit at Monte Cassino. And near the end, some of the stories, I remember talking to a gentleman that said he was going up and machine gun shot, a little bit, low in front of him. So he dove down in front of an old stone block that used to hold like an old hand pumper well. And he was laying on his back, and if he would roll over, he would be high enough, the machine gun was shooting just over that block, just chipping away at the stone. So he has to pop up, firing over his head, boom, 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 with his M1, and then reloading. He laid on his back for 2 days and 2 nights. Think of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain at Fredericksburg, doing this nightly battle with this guy. Said he couldn't sleep because he said if I fell asleep, I'd probably wake up in heaven because there's no way I would hear this guy if he came at me at night. 2 days and 2 nights trying to conserve his ammo to make sure he had enough. Couldn't get up and go to the bathroom. He had to do it there. He only had maybe a little bit of water. Maybe he had something to eat. Maybe he didn't. So in the end, the fighting comes down to hand. And after suffering nearly 3,500 more casualties, Monte Cassino finally falls. And after that, shortly after that, the defensive lines are broken and the Germans begin a wholesale retreat. And so the United States Army gets to the outskirts of Rome. Here you can see the Colosseum on June 4th. It is officially liberated on June the 5th. Now, luckily, as the Germans evacuated northward, they did not damage or destroy any historical monuments, the Colosseum, the aqueducts, the Circus Maximus, the tomb of Augustus Caesar, all of these things they just left intact. And so the army had to wait until Mark Clark came in to drive into central Rome. Also liberated will be the Vatican City. There's a new book coming out, if it hasn't done so, talking about how a lot of Jewish refugees were hidden in the tunnels beneath the Vatican and were able to be, ferreted and escaped out, getting, to France, England, or, France, Spain, England, and the United States. So interesting to see what that's all about. Here's the problem with the soldiers who fought in the Italian campaign. One, there are several. A lot of guys that fought in this were, Italian immigrants or first-generation Americans, so they still knew the language. So some of these guys who were trapped and cut off threw down their American garb and put on Italian peasant garb and just blended in with the locals. So after being there, the army realizes it was losing a lot of guys. They said, hey, if you've been gone, we're going to throw a big spaghetti dinner and a bunch of wine. Come on back in. We'll get you back to your unit, and it won't be a problem. And all these guys come back in. Now, if you fought and you were only gone for 3-4 days a week, and you could prove that, hey, you were laying low, you were good. But if you had been gone for a month or two, if you were a coward or a shirker, you were arrested. And so we have someone on staff who, distant family relative, was arrested for this and was dishonorably discharged. And dishonorable discharge now is bad. Imagine getting that back in the 1940s. Good luck getting a job. The other group I want to mention is the 110th Nisi Regimen. N-I-E-S-I. And the 100th Nisi Regiment are extremely special because they were all Japanese Americans. All of their families were in the internment camps in California, and here were these guys who were proud of being American. They wanted to serve. So they were sent to Italy. And if you look at the Nisi Regiment and their exploits fighting from Salerno all the way through to Rome, they have one of the highest kill ratios of any American unit in the war, and every single one of them, the 110th Nisi Regiment of the 5th Army, was decorated for bravery, while their families were still unbelievably locked up in the internment camps in California. So we've got the Nisi Regiment. Also, and my grandfather used to talk about the P-51 Mustang pilots. When those guys were up there, every pilot I've talked to said they had no fear. If you've seen the Cuba Gooding Jr. movie Red Tails, well, this is the famous African-American pilots of the P-51 Mustang. And the P-51 is going to be this awesome plane. It is the fastest internal combustion engine plane in the war, flying between 525 and 550 miles an hour with 850 caliber machine guns, if you remember that shell I showed you. So whatever the P-51 hit, it shredded. So it had a lot of firepower, and it was also wicked fast. And as the 17th Air Force begins to bomb enemy targets, they're escorted by these P-51s. And in the Red Tails are the famous Tuskegee Airmen. These are African-American volunteer pilots. And because of the segregation, you pilots talk about that they would see these Tuskegee Airmen do things in a P-51. They're daring, their bravery, dashing and diving, putting themselves in danger to protect the bombers. They said, when we saw the Tuskegee Airmen, we knew nothing was going to come near us because they did things with the plane we didn't think was possible. So we want to give a shout out to the African-American Tuskegee Airmen and to the Nisi Regiment. And why those stories aren't told more is because Rome falls the 4th, the 5th of June, 1944. And while these guys want to celebrate and have the world recognize their accomplishments, they're overshadowed because the very next day is D-Day. So the Italian campaign men really know. There's Audie Murphy, the most highly decorated American soldier. I'll tell you some stories about him. Fights here, and everyone forgets because the next day is the big show as we go in on D-Day. So that's it for the Italian campaign. I'm going to load these PowerPoints up along with the video with the question sheets. We're going to take a couple days break from straight lecture, and we'll catch up with some of the Pacifics and a band of brothers as we get set for my favorite topic of all time. That is the invasion of Normandy and D-Day. So be set for that. If you see somebody, you talk to somebody, give them a shout out about the Google Classroom just to make sure, and we'll see you guys soon.